World stock markets in turmoil. Canadians express anxiety if Liberals win. Mark Carney to meet with David Eby today. Privy Council says middle class doomed, and so much on election 2025. I'm Jim Check with the Now Media Group. On the phone with me, Ian Burns, in this completely sucked in central Okanagan day. Like the rain, it's raining out there, and you can't see very far. Very foggy, very rainy, and still mild though. How are things looking out in Ottawa?
It's sunny and glorious in the capital today, but it's only about 6 degrees, but it's a very nice bright day.
Awesome. Well, let's get right into it. We got lots today in the really big show. So much to get through. But this one here, new Angus Reid Institute survey on support for separation of Liberal Party forms government, the next government. 33% of Saskatchewans, 30% of Albertans, and 30% of Quebecers say they would rather leave than put up with another Liberal term.
Yeah, I mean that's quite bleak, that, isn't it, to look at. Also interesting. I think it's quite interesting that 17% in BC. I mean that's a pretty big proportion, isn't it? I mean, I
Yeah.
don't know. Obviously, this is pretty small sample. I mean, you can see the numbers there. It's not actually that many people, but these pollsters, they're supposed to be experts at this kind of thing, and they can pick representative samples. But it's still, I mean, it's not necessarily telling us anything we don't already know. That in the Western provinces, and obviously Quebec, going back centuries, but I mean, the Western provinces now are quite trepidatious as they stare down the barrel of a Mark Carney government. Many people in those provinces think that could spell doom.
I've heard from people on LinkedIn that have reached out to me and say that they're conservatives and that they're going to actually vote for the Liberal Party because they want this to happen. And I've said to them that, like, you can't do this. You can't sell out Canada. You got to do your best you can to hold it together. Like, do what you can, and I'm hopefully I made some sense to some of these people that Canada is important. But I know that there's a lot of people that have had enough. So this sentiment is actually growing, I think, in even Quebec. Like I said, we've seen that too with Quebec, and Quebec has had those. I think there has been two challenges for Quebec in the past history of Canada.
Yeah, two plebiscites, yeah, two referenda.
There you go. Premier Eby to meet with Mark Carney as he's in British Columbia here, and talking about the soaring lumber duties imposed by the U.S.
Yeah. Sorry, I will just say one more thing, just to
Sure.
rewind a sec. One third, so that's about the proportion that this poll suggests are in favor of separation. It's just worth mentioning, and it's just something that like dinged in my mind. It's estimated that in the 1770s, so during the War of Independence, as they like to call it, the Americans, um, that's about the proportion of people that wanted to separate in the United States. It's just one of those things. I mean, you might look at that and say, "Oh, it's only a third," but it, history shows you that it really depends what that third does. And in the case of the American colonies, obviously, they went absolutely insane and succeeded in winning a civil war with their British brothers, didn't they? And they pulled that off, and they've created this hilarious country now that dominates the world. So I'm just saying, a third of a population can make all the difference. So that's not something to be dismissed because it's only one third, I would say. But yeah, Carney and Eby. That is an interesting one. After that sort of lackluster endorsement by Eby of Jagmeet Singh the other day, and that extremely cringe video that they that they released, but I sense that they're gonna get along quite well. But the lumber issue is it's just enormous, isn't it? That it couldn't really have got worse. It was already terrible, but they've somehow Trump has found a way to make it even worse, and I have no idea what they're going to discuss because it's not like there's any other markets that can be expanded to necessarily. I think it's just all pretty much doom and gloom, isn't it, sadly?
And we've done so many stories on the forest industry here in British Columbia over the past year here with Canfor, one of BC's larger companies, saying that the BC is no longer viable to do businesses because of the uncertainty. This is far before the Trump tariffs, and their complaint has been access to timber, fiber, and access like to permitting and regulations and that. And I interviewed Premier Eby and told him those complaints, and he said that they recognize that those are problems and that they are working on it. But that's not discussed in here. They're just not competitive. Like British Columbia is not competitive in the forestry sector. We've lost over 10,000 forestry workers, I think, in the past 2 years, and that was a Kofi stat. I also interviewed Kofi. The lumber industry in British Columbia is in turmoil, and this does not help at all. When are they going to address the access to fiber issues?
Yeah, that's something that they don't really want to ever talk about, do they? I remember you also interviewed Brenda Bailey
Yeah,
back when she was merely the jobs minister. Now she's the finance minister, sort of number two in the province. But I remember you asked her about that, and it's not really something that they like to talk about, particularly, is it? I get that feeling anyway.
yeah,
But I mean, not just the fiber, but just forestry in general, I would say for the NDP. It's almost kind of, which is a massive irony, isn't it, when you consider the NDP is supposed to be the working class party, the party of industry, which is
yeah.
just laughable at the minute, really, isn't it?
At that time, Brendan Bailey was responsible for jobs and innovation, and there was a jobs report that they did. Missing in there, and I pointed out to her, was the forestry sector. Like it wasn't really in there, and she said, "Oh, it's because we're looking at value added stuff for the lumber industry." And I said, "Well, I would argue that the sawmill industry is value added because that is the finished product that goes into building homes." And she's like, "Oh yeah, you're right there, but like how many mills have we closed? Canfor uh, is not going forward with this Houston planned expansion, closed Bear Lake, and also cut production in Prince George. I interviewed the VP of AP Planers. They closed the Merritt Mill, and all of these things they talk about is that the regulations and access to timber, and this is ongoing. And at the same time, they point out that Alberta is going great guns, and because the British Columbia government, Bailey and them, like to point out that like lumber industry is suffering. Even if you look in like I can't remember which state, like Mississippi or something like that. I said, well, maybe we should just look next door, and they're not suffering. So
Hmm. Although it'll be quite hard if they struggle to sell into the US, because obviously that's a great
yeah,
market, isn't it? But in general, I mean, I just feel, I don't think it's a coincidence that Alberta was doing all right, and it's run by sort of the right, generally speaking, and BC wasn't doing too well, and it's run by the left. I don't think that that's a coincidence. I think there's something inherently difficult for people on the modern left when it comes to any kind of resource extraction. But I think trees have a special kind of spiritual role for the left, as does the environment in general and the kind of just like general ecology. And in BC, I mean, it's basically it pretty much is a religion, isn't it? It's almost like a paganistic style nature worship in BC kind of predominates, particularly in Vancouver, which obviously decides so much of what happens in British Columbia. And I think that sort of contradiction is at the heart of a lot of this, because ultimately, when you really sort of chip away and you get down to the bottom of it, I think the people in the left, the people that kind of run BC, they don't really want to cut trees down ever. It's kind of like it's not something that they particularly like. So I think that's a problem. Whereas in Alberta, obviously, the philosophy is just completely different. It's a completely different attitude towards nature, and I think as a consequence, it's a bit more sort of free and easy in that area.
well, you can go back and watch all the interviews we did. We also interviewed Bruce Ralston, then Forest Minister. We interviewed Bruce Rose, AP Planner's Vice President, and he said at that time that you're bang on with what you just said. That most people in the Lower Mainland, the voting kind of like juggernaut, thinks all the trees are similar to the ones in Stanley Park and they're not for cutting down. So they protect trees. They don't realize that most of the interior British Columbia, north of British Columbia, is a different type of forest and needs to be actively managed, or we're at risk of wildfires. And again, compared to Finland, which has a similar type forest, um, they have very little in wildfires because they have a very young forest because they actively manage their forests with cutting. They treat it as a
Yeah,
crop almost. They treat it almost like a crop, and that gets renewed all the time.
but there's also, I think, this like ludicrous idea in British Columbia that the First Nations, going back thousands of years, that they had a better attitude towards nature and particularly forests, and that they kind of lived in nature. And that's just born out of complete abject ignorance because there are no real like virgin forests in BC because the First Nations who've lived in Canada for 15,000 or more years or something like that have always gone in and taken advantage of nature, and that includes forests. And that meant burning, that meant cutting them down. And it's not just Canada, it's the same is true in the Amazon. Same is true everywhere on this planet. Humans have always messed about with nature and forests. But I think a lot of people have this like ridiculous idea when they're sat next to a totem pole in Stanley Park. They think like, yeah, the right way to do it is just to let nature grow and be free. It's just like humans have
Uh,
never really done that, but they have it in their mind that that used to be the case
yeah.
before Europeans arrived. And
Well,
obviously it's just completely false.
I even asked Premier Eby on the burnt forest, like where wildfire's gone through, and I said they can't even get permits. And there's a documentary out there you can find it. It's about Merritt. They can't even get permits to cut burnt trees down, and if they don't cut them down soon enough, they're just useless. They're not worth cutting down. So there you go. And they
And
said,
that's just so ridiculous, isn't it? And to invoke the kind of First Nations as though like they would approve of that, or that's what they've done. It's so stupid. It's just wrong. It's not true.
and I think Bruce Rose also said that the close relationship that BC government has with Stephen Gibault against any type of forestry is the real reason that BC sawmill companies can't get access to fiber. There you go. This is a really bad one too. BC Construction Industry Survey reveals shocking data. 91% reported late payments, 69% not being paid at all. We're gonna look on this story. We're just gonna put that out there. We're gonna take a closer look at this. We're gonna see what we can do. We'll get a story up on Now Media today, but we'll just touch that headline. And this is another this story from Holly Doan's Blacklocks, where the Privy Council says predicts the middle class is doomed.
Yeah, well, I shouldn't laugh, but I mean,
Because that's who you
the
are.
Privy Council,
Yeah.
what are they up to, the Privy Council, eh? That's quite an interesting thing for them to
They said
determine.
Canadians should expect to be poorer over the next 5 years. The forecast was drawn from interviews from experts across the government of Canada who said economic outlooks for families were so stark they predicted, and this is bad, a national health crisis. Downward social mobility is the norm. Collapse of the middle class was rated among the top 10 most likely disruptions over the next 3 to 5 years. Another likely event is people can't afford to live on their own.
This is quite similar actually to that CSIS, or maybe it was the RCMP actually. I can't remember who it was that they conducted a report or compiled a report the last few years, didn't they, about how scared they are of potential unrest in Canada and how it could almost be like civil war conditions. And the majority of that report was based on this sort of idea that the economics will decline to such an extent, the sort of people's finances, that it will spark unrest and sort of
Yeah.
violence.
That the collapse of the middle class could leave Canadians so despondent a national mental health crisis would result. As people lose hope in improving their lives, mental health challenges and associated economic and social stresses may increase. Meanwhile, as the extremely wealthy continue to accumulate a larger share of wealth, resentment may deepen until calls for greater wealth distribution reach a critical point. And this is all like, you know what I mean? Like this is like the last 10 years has gotten worse and worse and worse. And then people, it just doesn't make any sense, right?
And this is the reality that, like, when you have people that are looking at our personal favorite, which is debt to GDP ratio, but when people are looking at these data like that, they're looking at like amount of debt. They're looking at just raw sort of GDP figures. They're looking at I don't know what it might be, like exports or something like that. And then they come out to a podium and they're like, the economy has never been better. But the actual reality is this. This is the reality. And the most important thing is where it says in this story or in this document, where it says people are increasingly finding themselves poorer than their parents. Like a sort of real tangible, like noticeable decline in from one generation to the next in terms of personal wealth. It's not even wealth, is it really? It's like living standards would be a better way to look at it. that's not a hallmark of a successful economy. And that's essentially, I think, why the Biden Harris administration ended up losing, why they lost that election, and why they were nowhere near as popular as they thought they would be. Because they were looking at like the jobs figures, and they were looking at the GDP, and they were thinking like, oh, great, like we're definitely going to get reelected. But the reality is there's this unaddressed um, sickness that lies underneath the US economy and the Canadian economy and the British economy and all the rest of them. And it doesn't really show up in the data, or not the sort of usual figures that people look at, but it basically results in poverty and misery for large sections of these societies. And
Yeah, and
yeah, I
the
mean,
stat,
this also explains Pierre Poilievre. This explains what his whole message, you know?
and the sad reality is Canada is one of the richest nations in the world, and that wealth has been suppressed for the last 10 years. Our natural resources have been suppressed. Like you can't even get a project done in 18 years, some of the things we're going to talk about a little bit later, but the natural resources that Canada has, that the world is begging for, has not been allowed to benefit Canadians. All we do is we continue to tax and tax and tax and tax, more taxes, more taxes, more taxes, and then price things out of reach for so many people. But let's get into the election, because that's what we're going to talk about. There's a lot of stuff in here. And this is really key to listen to. This first clip here is so important to what everything is going on and what we just talked about here. So let's play this. We got Mark Carney here speaking to a crowd here. Let's play that clip here.
We are going to build ourselves into a... Don't take it away. I was just saying clean. That was Danielle. She was coming in. A clean energy superpower.
I think maybe one of his own people tried to take that away because they don't want people to know that they're still working on clean energy superpower as opposed to our biggest contributor to our GDP, which is our oil and gas out of Alberta. By far the biggest contributor to Canada's GDP, and we did that map. You can go on my LinkedIn, you can find the stories on Kelowna Now, is oil and gas out of Alberta, LNG, and just think how it would be doing for Canada if it wasn't suppressed. And here he is talking about a clean energy superpower. And I did a thing on LinkedIn too, and it's an editorial on Kelowna Now about our benched superstars. Our Wayne Gretzky's and Marilyn Lemieux are benched while we play minor leaguers, solar and wind and all that stuff. And they may become superpowers someday. I'm a big believer in wind and solar, but they're not ready to take the main stage. And these people keep pushing them on the main stage at the detriment of what our real wealth is.
Yeah, also very interesting that in that little bit, because it was kind of like a bit. It was like a comedy performance that I watched the whole thing, but he was very cheeky, wasn't he? And very kind of he mocked Danielle Smith. That wasn't the only time he did it.
Not just one time. A couple of times he took shots at Danielle Smith because she's sticking up for the oil and gas LNG sector, and he keeps mocking her. That's not a way. I mean, again, Alberta contributing to most of the provinces. Like they give money, transfer payments to most provinces, and that's what Alberta gets back. And no wonder there's people talking about the disrespect towards Alberta.
Well, it's also, given that what we just talked about, people are starting to want their province to separate. It's just not. He is the prime minister after all. He's not just the leader of a party that's trying to win election. He is also the prime minister. He's the leader of this country, and it's not. It's just not good, is it? It's not good to mock sort of probably the most separatist province.
Well, it contradicts what they say. They say now is a time for unity, for all of us to stand together, and in the same breath, he took a couple of shots at Danielle Smith. So where is this unity? I mean, that's the same thing. And we didn't put it in today. Melanie Jolie stands up and says Donald Trump and his tariffs just punishes his own people, and we would, like tariffs. All they do is hurt their own population, and Canada will respond with tariffs. I'm just like, do you even know what you're saying?
Yeah. Well, It is. It's such a shame as well, and I feel like he almost got egged on a bit, Carney, because he did that before he sort of name dropped Danielle Smith. He was talking about Doug Ford on Fox News. I don't know if you saw that bit, and it
Well,
was actually,
he slagged the Americans there, yeah.
yeah, it was actually, in my opinion, quite an amusing little joke actually, where he's like, we're like we're taking this real serious. We're sending Doug Ford to Fox News, and it was just like, yeah, okay, that's funny. He did it in like a sort of as if he was like a general or something. It was kind of funny, but then I feel like the crowd laughed probably a little bit too sort of enthusiastically, and then he kind of riffed on their reaction, and then he started to do the Danielle Smith, and I just think maybe it was a bit unwise, but he is, after all, a political greenhorn. He doesn't know when to stop, maybe.
Yeah, but also, like, different than Justin Trudeau is insulting the Americans while he's doing, because that's his power base right now, to infuriate the Americans. And also, it contradicts like that thing on Danielle Smith twice. They stand at the podium and talk about unity. And here's one of the more powerful provinces when it comes to our share of GDP. And there's a couple of shots there. And the question is, like, when the mic quit on clean energy, and I've pointed this out a few times. When he talks about energy, making Canada's energy superpower, he never mentions oil and gas and LNG. He talks about energy, and he just admitted right here, a green energy superpower, a clean energy superpower.
Yeah, and laughed about it. But I would say, like, another thing to bear in mind there. So he's mocked Danielle Smith, who is actually a popular leader, a relatively popular leader of Alberta. But could you imagine him having a laugh about Legault in Quebec, who, by the way, isn't popular? He's extremely unpopular, but he still wouldn't do it because everybody in Canada, it seems to be, and certainly in the Canadian elite, they know, as part of their DNA almost, it's in their bones. They know that you don't mess with Quebec. If you're ever going to speak about Quebec, it has to be fawning. You have to just talk about how much you love Quebec, how it's a nation, and you have to protect it and wrap it up in bubble wrap. But then Alberta's like fair game, isn't it? And this is the kind of thing that Albertans hear that, whereas maybe the rest of the country don't. It's almost like a kind of white noise or something. The Albertan people who are sort of following national politics, they'll hear that and they'll see that, and they'll recognize that Quebec is treated like some sort of special angelic child that has to be constantly put on a throne. Whereas Alberta, it's just like anything you want to say about Alberta, it's fine. You can laugh about Alberta, and you can do and say what you want, really. And that hypocrisy, that will only increase separatist attitudes, I think.
And I'm a big believer in solar, and I'm a big believer in EVs. I drive an EV and I have solar on my roof. Big believer in that stuff, but it is not a today thing. It is like a minor leaguers, and the future is now for Canadians. We want a future now. Canadians need and deserve a future now, not to sacrifice everything for a future that is 10, 20, who knows how far away. Canadians need a future now. And that future is our natural wealth.
I think it might be fair to call solar a superstar and an A-team player for some people in the Sahara Desert or something like that. But it's absolutely not for Canada, not yet. In terms of the amount of sunlight that you get, if you look at the nerds who are obsessed with this kind of thing, the difference is extraordinary. It's like 3 times as much sunlight in certain parts of the world compared to Canada. That's why it would require much better battery technology, wouldn't it? So even if it is ready in some parts of the world, which it's argued by certain experts that it is, it's certainly not ready yet in Canada to take a big sort of proportion of the burden.
Yeah, and most people understand hockey analogies. Solar right now is lucky to make a junior B team. We have superstars sitting on the bench that for the past 10 years, we haven't let them off the bench. We've suppressed them. So it's time. And then here's, setting that up, here's Pierre Poilievre's new ad talking about resources. So we're going to play this clip here.
Canada was always a land of opportunity, and it was our resources that were the lifeblood of that opportunity. First Nations were trading copper from the Great Lakes across the Northeast long before European settlers found themselves in Canada. When they did, the fur trade extended the continent as French and English traded with First Nations and Métis. The trade took them from the Atlantic to the Pacific, where people came from around the world to strike it rich during the gold rush. The Chinese would call this Gumsan, the gold mountain, and the liquid gold would soon flow as the Leduc oil discovery created lasting prosperity.
In the little town of Leduc, Alberta, Imperial Leduc number 1 struck oil.
That was unreal when that gusher came on.
Resources are what made this country.
And as the oil flowed out, the money flowed in.
It made the country really, once we had our own oil and everything.
And they ought to make us the richest nation on earth. Yet Canada's GDP per capita has grown a measly 0.5% over the last 10 years. It has been the lost Liberal decade of Trudeau Carney. Why is that? Because the keep it in the ground Liberals like Mark Carney and Stephen Guilbeault have kept projects that would have unleashed potential entangled in regulations that block them from getting built. For example, it now takes 17 years to get a mine approved through the thicket of permits, approvals, and regulatory processes. The average time to complete a mine is nearly 25% longer in Canada than in Australia and 40% longer than in the United States. The difference? Australia and the US work with rather than against those who build major projects. Is it any surprise, therefore, that the Australian GDP per capita grew 16 times faster than Canada's and America's grew 40 times faster than Canada's? Not at all. We need to rediscover what we know from our history. You can't block your way to prosperity. That's why I'm announcing my one and done plan to clear the red tape and get projects built, creating jobs and paychecks for Canadians. It's simple. 1, my Conservative government will set up a one-stop shop so businesses can contact one bureau that will deal with all the bureaucracies from all levels of government. That will make sure that businesses no longer have to go to multiple agencies at different levels of government. They will have one point of contact. 2, we will have one environmental review for one project, instead of having multiple reviews that duplicate.
You can go watch that whole thing, and I advise people to go watch that full thing. I think it's very important to watch it. And in this one and done thing, he did put a press release. I'm sure we're going to put it up on Now Media today. It talks about some of the projects that they're ready to start to approve: an LNG Canada Phase 2 expansion project, a Suncor-based mine extension, a Rock 1 uranium mine in Saskatchewan, a Singapore Lake gold mine in Ontario, Upper Beaver Lake gold mine in Ontario, Northern Road Link in Ontario, Crawford nickel project in Ontario, Trillis gold and copper mine in Quebec, and the Sorel Tracy Port Terminal in Quebec, and Cape Ray gold and silver mine in Newfoundland. God knows the people on the Rock need some work. And that, like, we need to get stuff going and tap that natural wealth that's beneath our feet, and that's so that all Canadians can be rich. I know somebody reached out here and said that, that not a lot of people have the funds to buy solar or EVs, and this is the way to get them. This is the way to give prosperity to so many in Canada, and we need to tap those natural resources. The future has to be now. Still there, Ian? Did you lose? Oh,
Yeah, sure am. I was interested in that video. He likes Polyev is very interested in history, I think. It comes across in these little videos that he puts out. He often takes it back to like the 19th century or 17th century even. And 18th century. And I find that quite interesting because with the Liberals, and this is another left-right distinction that I've noticed. On the left and the sort of liberal left, there's no real interest in history, I find. I mean, that's quite a generalization, but
they don't like our history.
I think in general, history began in about 1965 for the liberal left, whereas the right, and this includes Trump. Obviously, Trump is constantly talking about William McKinley now, like a fairly obscure president of the late 19th century. It just intrigues me that the right is, generally speaking, much more interested in history than the left.
Yeah, I mean, our natural resources, we're one of the richest nations in the world, and that has been suppressed for 10 years. And that has been done on purpose, like purposely done. Stephen Guilbeault is one of the leaders in that and stopping everything. Karina Gold, an MP, basically said we need to landlock Alberta's natural resources. Stephen Guilbeault doesn't even want to build roads. That was one of his comments. They talk about even when somebody was going on holidays, and I get this wrong. It's Mark Holland, I believe, that was screaming that people shouldn't even be going on holidays because they're going to burn the planet down. And again,
Yep.
you've said this many times, that this is just pure nonsense to expect Canada to carry the burden for the rest of the world while our people suffer.
But my impression is that it's the latter that a lot of these people are more interested in. They're quite interested in the idea of people suffering, and not necessarily those politicians that we mentioned, but I mean the more extreme side of the group that call themselves environmentalists. I think quite a lot of it is it's about suffering, and it's about inconvenience, and it's about there's an almost religious purity to it, I've observed. But yeah, I'm not necessarily saying that applies to Mark Holland or anybody like that, but maybe you could say that he's been sniffing those fumes, hasn't he? The fumes of the extreme environmentalist lobby.
Mark Carney, CBC Radio Canada, pillar of Canadian identity. He says he's going to strengthen it, and he promises to dole out more money. And Jagmeet Singh joins him in his pledge to support the CBC defend sovereignty and fight misinformation. So there you go. They're pledging to put more money in, and Poilievre has repeatedly spoken of defunding the English-speaking CBC. He's not saying get rid of it. He's saying defund the English-speaking part of it, but preserving the French language service. There you go. People are scared to do anything against Quebec.
Exactly, yeah. He wouldn't dare cross them, would he? Which is just another indication of how powerful Quebec is in this country. But yeah, I mean, I like this that like they mentioned misinformation, so give money to the CBC and then they'll stem the rise of misinformation. I hope that they mean misinformation that is promulgated by the CBC, which is, an enormous amount of stories contain misinformation. So I'd like to think that they're going to improve themselves in that department.
No discussion of Bill C-18 that has crippled local independent media all across Canada. Close to 100 outlets have failed in the past close to 2 years since Bill C-18 has been invoked, and including our outlet being choked off and crippled because we don't get any funding, being choked off, taking away our audience of over 200,000 that we earned over 10 years serving our community here in Kelowna, and putting them at risk when it comes to wildfires and such, when people can't get information because we can't put our news on social media where people get it. And that, the Liberal government even has said, is now they're paying Meta to put their content on after they broke their boycott against what they called the evil empire, Meta. And they're now paying Meta to put their information on there, including Mark Carney's Liberals in this campaign. They're paying millions of dollars to advertise on Meta. Well, we still cannot put our content on there.
And they're a lot more hostile to Elon Musk's social media platform X.
Yeah.
Despite there not being
banned,
any issues of that sort with X, but they feel safe attacking that and even boycotting that sort of unilaterally.
Collie Doan's Blacklock story, no comments, says CBC News. CBC News said to avoid all editorial comment. Well, let's watch that. On funding after Prime Minister Carney promised millions in additional subsidies if they're reelected. And then so that is almost, like some people would argue that's election interference, promising the state broadcaster millions of dollars in increased funding. And last year was a record budget, like $1.4 billion the grant is CBC's main revenue source. And they promised them another $150 million. Pascal St-Onge and Justin Trudeau, while they were going out the door, didn't even stop there. They said, well, let's double the budget of the CBC.
Yeah, I mean, this is something that should upset, I would say, pretty much 100% of people in this country. At least 100% of people that actually believe in democracy and our way of governing, because this is really, really serious and really bad and very, very ugly for the parties, as I said the other day, to be almost like bidding as though they're at an auction, bidding to win the media with taxpayers' money. This is like Banana Republic style election campaigning, and I think it's actually quite disappointing, and it's to the discredit of the CBC that they haven't come out and said, something, something that would exculpate themselves here and just say, look, we're just keeping our head down. We're just going to get on with this. We cannot be bought, or something along those lines. You cannot buy favorable coverage from the CBC. That would be nice to hear, wouldn't it? But
They should have said
instead,
that when
we don't
offered.
hear anything. We just see the money being thrown around, and we just have to arrive at the obvious conclusion that this will influence the CBC, because why wouldn't it? I mean, how could this not influence the CBC?
They should have said we don't want to hear anything about increases during the election, that it's not fair to talk about, especially, or they shouldn't talk about it. Anyway, the Conservative MP, Kevin Waugh, it's a Saskatoon Grasswood, says, called the CBC a disgrace. The CBC cut hundreds of jobs while awarding lavish bonuses. CBC managers last year acknowledged pocketing $14.9 million in bonuses while cutting 346 jobs.
Delightful.
They asked for an increase of $500 million to their, so they could have a budget of $1.9 billion. Pascal St. Onge says, like, hey, why not $2.5 billion? So
that's the art of the deal, isn't it?
there you go. And then here we have Pierre Poilievre reacting to a Canadian Press thing, and this just kind of ties into this CBC and the funding thing. We're going to play this little clip here.
It's over $100 million in regulatory relief to the mainstream media.
We don't want to give any tax dollars to the mainstream media. Our belief is that the mainstream media and all...
Decision then, your party's decision to grant regulatory relief?
So I'll answer your question. The media that is bought and paid for, where are you from, by the way? Which outlet are you in? Which outlet? Which outlet?
Canadian Press.
Ah, okay, Canadian Press. So you're talking about tax dollars for media. Isn't CBC your biggest? Isn't no? I can answer.
I asked regulatory.
Yeah, and do you want to answer?
Party want to grant $100 million in regulatory relief to the mainstream media.
When would you like me to respond? Okay, good. Okay, great. So of course you are a tax-funded media outlet and spreading Justin Trudeau's message.
Why did you
and so you're interrupting me again. You're interrupting me again. I am answering the question.
Do you regret granting?
So that's an older clip, and then it goes on and on about, but his position is that he's not funding media, and that's why I thought it was relevant to put in there.
I think it's also relevant because it highlights, again, an obvious standard. There's absolutely no way that those reporters would speak to Mark Carney like that. There's just no way. It's just not possible to imagine that ever happening. And I think that by itself is an indictment of the media in this country.
There you go. And then we did send our reporter, Corvin Burnson, out to Penticton because there was a rally there in Penticton on Saturday. We're going to play this for you.
It was a busy scene at a Penticton warehouse on Saturday as thousands of people packed into a rally to hear Conservative Party leader Pierre Poilievre speak.
This is absolutely incredible. Just the turnout itself makes me know that this is going to happen this year, guys.
It's amazing. There's so many people here. It just blows my mind.
We got good turnout here. It's promising.
Yeah, I couldn't believe how many people were here. I mean, looking around, I thought there was going to be maybe like a couple hundred, and we showed up, and there's got to be around 1,000 people here. It's crazy.
Central Okanagan, Similkameen, Nicola MP Dan Albus got the rally started before local candidate Helena Conant took to the stage. After sharing a brief message with the audience, Conant handed the mic over to Anna Poilievre, who got the crowd ready for Pierre's appearance.
Are we going to elect a Conservative government who's going to put Canada first for change?
And looking for change was a common theme at Saturday's rally.
I came out to support Pierre and Helena on the upcoming elections. I want to see big change. I hope everybody comes out and gives their vote. It looks like we have an absolutely huge crowd here today. I can't wait for the bus to pull in.
I just kind of think we need a change in the country. I mean, the last 10 years, we've really seen no growth. So yeah, I just think we need a big shift. I mean, if I ever want to be able to afford a house, I don't think it's going to be the way that we're going down right now. So I just think a change is really needed in Canada right now.
Poilievre covered numerous topics in his speech, focusing on the Liberals' record over the past decade, the situation with Donald Trump, housing, crime, energy, healthcare, the carbon tax, and much more.
Canadian promise so that anyone who works hard gets a great life in a beautiful house on a safe street, protected by brave troops under our proud Canadian flag. Canada first, let's bring it home!
Yeah, it was awesome to listen to Pierre. It was super exciting. I think he had a lot of good points. Seemed to resonate really well, especially his comments on crime and the economy. And I think, people are ready for change.
I thought it went well. He answered so many things, so many points about what Canadians are fighting for and the fact that we're just defending ourselves and trying to stand up locally for Canadians and all of the Canadian resources that we have. And I thought it was wonderful and very uplifting to see so many bodies there and such a big presence and so many children. And he was all about keeping our kids safe and axing the tax, and it was wonderful.
We don't.
There you go. We have another little clip here just to show you the size of this rally. I'm just going to play this quick little clip here.
Good boy and I were just making some plans for our future camping trip here. So you're going to have to give me some good recommendations for sites. When I came here.
And then we got David Atkin from Global talking about the rallies, the size of the rallies that Pierre's been getting together.
He's a rock star, and just a message to viewers. I'm looking at the camera. If you're planning on going to one of these things, 3 hours before doors open is about when you want. That's what we're seeing. We're there 3 hours beforehand, and there's already several hundred people lined up to get into these venues. So he's a rock star, and just a message to viewers. I'm looking at the camera.
There you go. Pierre drawing big crowds everywhere he goes. David Atkins saying he's got rock star type status. Polls not showing that though. Polls not showing what the crowds are showing. A lot of young people in that crowd too. And that's where it seems to be too. A lot of the young people for Pierre, and the older crowd definitely seems to be voting for Mark Carney.
I would say, like, when it comes to polls, a lot of the polls are actually, you actually have to be a member of whatever it is, like the Angus Reid Institute Forum or something like that, I think they call it. And then they just ask the members of that forum. That's, I mean, to me, that seems like not the greatest way to do a poll. But something as well about polls is like they call people, don't they? And they text you or call you. I mean, anybody that knows anything about anybody aged under 30 or so will know that they just refuse to pick up the phone or respond to a random text, you know? So I do kind of wonder, like, how do they get those samples when it comes to young people? And could it be that they're underestimating the vote for the Conservatives among younger people? But I don't know. This will all be figured out, I suppose, in the aftermath of the election. I would also say though that Pierre or the Conservative Party are getting quite a lot of flack right now in sort of like Liberal Party circles and left-leaning circles because of their attitude towards the media. And I think it was a guy from CBC or something like that was really complaining about it, and he complained on air saying that he wasn't allowed to ask a question or something like that. So I just wanted to say that that's one view on it. But before they came to the Okanagan, before the Pierre Carnival arrived in the Okanagan, they actually reached out to us and said, do you want to come to Azoyu's and ask a question? Because we always prioritize the local press ahead of, the mainstream press or the national press. So I think it's sort of worth bearing in mind that, yeah, Poilievre, it's quite easy to find evidence that he's hostile to certain members of the media, but I think he also has a different attitude, and he is seeking out the smaller outlets, the local outlets, the independent outlets, and being hostile to the bigger ones. So I just think that is an interesting little factoid that we can present to the people there.
And I would say, like, to the CBC person complaining is like, how do you think we feel when we're not allowed to ask questions? How do you
I
think
don't
what
think
we
they care how we feel.
How do you think we feel when Justin Trudeau comes to Kelowna and we have to like ask like 20 times, phone forever, and then get ghosted, and we finally have to phone a counselor from West Kelowna to find out where you're at so that we can sneak in to the event and get a question? Like, how do you think we feel when we're told that we're actually allowed in, but we're not allowed to ask a question? Don't dare ask a question, you won't be asked back, but we're allowed in to take photos.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, neither. I do find it a tad ironic, really, that it's the Liberals that are going on about the media, but they're presenting themselves as the media-friendly party, aren't they? Even though, you know, as anybody in the media knows, that is not true. I would say that actually there is no party, provincial or federal, that I can think of that is very friendly to the media in general. They're friendly to people that they think will be friendly to them, basically, I would say.
And here's Brian Lilly of the Media Toronto Star, not a friend of Mark Carney, with a tweet and just a little clip that he shows. Because we talked about these job losses on Friday, that there was 64,000 job losses, like full-time job losses, that was offset by part-time job losses to bring the total to 33,000. But and that, you know, at the same time, the American economy grew for jobs. So, and here's Mark Carney talking about how great Canada is.
I would say as well, our economy is stronger than the American economy. I would say as well, our economy is stronger than the American economy. I would say as well.
That's good. Again,
said it 3 times. No, it must be true.
Someone should show him that Privy Council report there and talking about how Canadians are just despondent on the economy. Again, this is similar to the Democrats when they were talking about how great the economy was, that people just don't understand it. There was even people in the left media like getting really angry at people talking about inflation. It seems like the same thing when Chrystia Freeland said there's no problems with the economy, it's just a vibe, it's not a recession, it's just a vibe session, and that people don't know what they're talking about. And the stats do not lie.
Yeah, or sometimes they do, depending on the ones you pick. And if you do just look at your old debt to GDP ratio, like Chrystia Freeland absolutely loves that, doesn't she? That's probably, I think she wakes up in the morning and she has it on a massive TV screen above her bed, telling her what the debt to GDP ratio is today for Canada. But I mean, if you look at stats like that, and then in your social circle are multimillionaires and, you know, extremely well-paid bureaucrats and politicians and so on, and that's it, then yeah, and you live in like downtown Toronto like she does, or quite a sort of nice part of Toronto, then yeah, you're probably going to think the economy's great. But if you go out there and speak to real people and enter real life, you'll find out very, very soon that it's not very good.
And then Mark Carney also doling out some candy to the retirees. I'm not sure. I read this, but it's got a nice plane there.
Yeah, I mean, Pierre's plane has Pierre written on it, so that's a bit better than that one, maybe. It's a bit more personal. But yeah, he just said he was going to increase a couple of things. I don't know if you actually have it in front of you there.
Yeah, he's going to reduce the amount that you have to withdraw from your RIF when you have to collapse your RRSP. So you can reduce that amount, so you can, again, just defer the taxation. Hopefully you're alive while you do it. Because, I mean, it's just a deferral. So it reduces. And also, he's going to increase guaranteed income supplement by 5% for 1 year. You know what I mean? Most people don't even qualify for GIS, and if you do, you're basically like, I mean, it's I don't know, like it's ridiculous actually. The amount people can barely afford. If you're on GIS, 5% isn't going to make a difference. I can tell you that right now.
Yeah, it's also interesting that it's so temporary, isn't it? He's done a couple of things like that. Like we just got another press release just now, actually, because he's in Victoria. So obviously, since he's in Victoria, he's made an announcement about like the environment and that sort of thing. And he's come out and said that he's going to make access to national parks and historic sites free for this summer, just this summer.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a funny policy announcement, that, isn't it?
Well, I guess if well, in a positive way to look at that, if it's Stephen Gibault has his way, all of Canada will be a national park, and you can go all around Canada for free everywhere for this summer.
Well, that's another thing in this release is that they're going to make 10 new national parks and marine conservation areas. So
that, one of them would be Alberta, one of them would be the whole of Alberta and the whole of Saskatchewan.
The Fort McMurray area, the Fort McMurray National Park.
There you go. Again, these are crumbs. Like this is 5% on GIS. Like this is like a breadcrumb. There you go. Thanks for the crumbs.
But I guess it's just something. It's like they do stuff like this so that when they're up there on the podium, they can say, "We're going to do this for young people. We're going to do this for seniors. We're going to do that." You know, it's like they want something for everyone, and I think in that sense it kind of is a crumb, isn't it? It's a crumb that they can throw while they're listing off all the other crumbs.
It's a crummy crumb at that. There you go. And I got all dressed up today. Nobody's even talking about my outfit here. So, I got all dressed up today. So, there you go.
Pretty rude, isn't it?
Jagmeet Singh. This is a Holly Doan Blacklock story. Thank you for Holly Doan for allowing us to use these stories. He faults Carney as a tax dodger. And Parliament should abolish offshore tax agreements known as tax havens. We've done this story a few times now, like those used by Brookfield Asset Management. We showed that nice building that this billion-dollar company runs it in a bike shop, basically, right? In the Bahamas. So they've evaded taxes in Canada. New Democrats calculated Carney's Brookfield avoided $5.3 billion in tax payments in the last 4 years using offshore subsidiaries. What does that mean? That's 50,000 nurses that could have been hired. And just think of maybe you could have chucked another crumb if you would have paid your taxes with Brookfield. And there you go. He also just moved that thing to the U.S. as well. And they asked Mark Carney if that's ethical, and his response, "I'm no longer at Brookfield." Well, you were there when it was happening, wasn't it? Weren't you?
That was a pretty feeble.
Hey, were you
response,
not there?
wasn't it?
You were responsible for it. You were the chairman of this company. You were the chair of this company. Takes no responsibility for anything, right? Takes zero responsibility and is still zero disclosure. Still benefiting off.
What I find so interesting about that is he took no responsibility. Yeah, you're right. He said, "I'm no longer at Brookfield," but then he proceeded to take responsibility for getting all the Canadian pensions and everything that use Brookfield, for getting them the best deal possible. Like he went on to say that. So it's kind of like, well, are you responsible or not?
Yeah, well, that's typical, right? Typical. And then hands off, protesters across Canada rally against Trump, threats to sovereignty. There were anti-Trump rallies across Canada on the weekend with protesters expressing fury at Trump's jibes at absorbing Canada. And then they turned up in Montreal, Halifax, and Winnipeg. There you go.
Yeah, they were all over, but I think those were the selected cities. They were in like pretty small places across like Nova Scotia and whatnot, but I guess it's the new kind of thing, isn't it? It's like the banging pots and pans together during COVID and all that kind of thing. It's the new meme. It's a real life meme.
We don't do a lot of sports, but this one is worth talking about as Alex Ovechkin surpasses the great one in goal scoring. I never thought I'd see the day this happens, but we got this clip where Alex Ovechkin scores goal number 859.
Center, send in Wilson on the flank, cross ice, Ovechkin fires! Score! The chasing days are done! Alex Ovechkin is the greatest goal scorer in the history of the NHL!
And then we got this clip here with Canadian great Wayne Gretzky there to shake his hand. He said, "I'd be the first one to shake your hand when you broke my record." And Gordie Howe was there when Wayne Gretzky broke the record too. So let's go ahead and play that clip here. Do you have that clip, Rommel? There we go.
And one last thing before Alex speaks. One of the great things about my setting the record, Colleen Howe bought my wife a beautiful gift and a wonderful note. And we know how the legacy of hockey passes down, but so does it with the families and the wives. So my wife has something very beautiful for his lovely wife that we want to pass on. But Mr. Leonis, congratulations. And when I set the record, they bought me a Rolls Royce. So you got your work cut out.
Alex Ovechkin, born in Moscow in 1985, now is the leading scorer in the NHL of all time. And like I said, Gordie Howe was there when Wayne Gretzky broke that record, and his record. So there you go, 3 greats: Howe, Gretzky, and now Ovechkin. A Washington Capital. We actually billeted a Kelowna Rocket that went on to play for. He played 1 season with the Washington Capitals and actually got a Stanley Cup ring out of it. And we went to a game as a guest of our former billet in Calgary. We watched him play. And you know, one of the things that was really cool, because you know, like the billets and parents and friends of the players, you stick around after, you get to go down to the bench and talk to them and all that kind of stuff. You know who stuck around? That didn't have anybody there to see him, but who stuck around because he knows that everybody wants to meet him? Alex Ovechkin stayed out on the ice to make sure that anybody that wanted to talk to him, he was there to do it. Pretty class act.
But is he better than Wayne Gretzky? That's the question.
I think Wayne Gretzky is the great one for Canada, although a lot of people right now seem to want to burn down his memory and then take away his street that was named after some left-leaning politicians were trying to get his street taken away from him and all that kind of stuff because of his his Trump-leaning politics. And they did the same thing to Alex Ovechkin, right, when the Russia started the war, because Alex Ovechkin is a Russian. And so there was a lot of hate towards Alex Ovechkin. These people with these identity politics just need to stop.
They even put poo on Wayne Gretzky's statue, didn't they? That was the worst one.
Wayne Gretzky's won more medals for Canada. And I was living in Edmonton at the time of the great dynasty. And you can't take away those memories, even if you want to be a crazy person. There you go. Markets in absolute turmoil, right? In absolute turmoil. Trump now saying he's even going to amp up. I'll let you talk. You take the lead on this.
Yeah, he did this with Canada, as we all know. I think Canada was kind of like the dry run, wasn't it? I don't think that it was never supposed to be the main event. But so he's hit China with well, it was like 34, wasn't it? 34% with the so-called reciprocal, plus 20% from which he put in place during the antagonism towards Canada and Mexico. So it was about 54%. And then the Chinese, interestingly, given what we've said and what everybody knows about tariffs, which is that they tend to hurt the country that sort of, puts them on. They've said that they're going to hit the US with retaliatory tariffs of 34%. And then the strange bit starts, I would say, really, which is that Trump then says, if you don't drop those tariffs, Mr. Naughty China, we're going to put another 50% tomorrow on, oh no, sorry, it wouldn't be tomorrow, it'd be effective on the 9th. So as of Wednesday, they're going to put an extra 50%, which means that China would then, or imports from China in the US would basically be double the price. So if you were going to get like a $100 TV or whatever in the US, it's going to then be $200, isn't it? It's like, that is absolutely nuts. So it's the complete death of the US-China relationship, really, if that is going to remain in place. But we'll see. I mean, I don't think the Chinese are going to back down. That's absolutely not how Xi Jinping operates. He does not back down, in my sort of knowledge of that man. So I'd say there will be no surrender from the Chinese.
Yeah, you need a calculator to keep up with this stuff. Apparently, though, 50 countries have already come to the table and are doing deals. We'll talk about that in a bit. But the U.S. stock market is just being whipsawed. Like, it's just absolute whipsaw. It's not the economies that are crashing. It's the stock markets. Let's be fair. Some reporters are saying the economies are crashing. No, it's the stock market. And it's a whipsaw, like up and down, up and down. Like, I've watched a few stocks go from very red to positive to red to like, I mean, it's just swinging. Right now, the Dow is off like 594 points. I think it was off over 1,000 at one point this morning. Like, there's a lot of money to be made in volatility. And right now, people are thinking about it, people are losing money. But I can tell you right now, there's money to be made in volatility. People don't like these algorithms don't really care for like slow, steady gains. They like whipsaw because like, there's lots of winners and losers, and a lot of it is just transfer of wealth. A lot of wealth disappeared though too. Trillions of dollars likely has been gone, including with Bitcoin, and we'll get into that in a bit here too. But the U.S. stock market just at the brink of entering to what is called a bear market. We got the stock market. You can see that the Dow, everything in red, very much all in red there. As she said, she wore a red dress, and this is what it looks like here. The only thing that's kind of like poking out a little bit that actually shows any kind of like semblance of positivity is our old friend gold, and we'll talk about gold next. Gold was up and down as well this morning. It was as high, it was way up this morning, and then down and then up and then down and up, and right now it's off by, I think, what, $63 US at 29.74. So gold even getting hit, and a lot of this stuff is to do with liquidity though too, because as you get margin calls, you have to sell what you can sell so that you can meet your margin requirements, and that is a lot of that for sure is due to meeting margin, right? So you're going to see these things swing, and it's kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy when things start to go crazy. Bitcoin also like below that 80,000 mark, which I didn't think we'd see. There you go, breaking down a little bit there, right? So that breakdown. So the next big support there is probably in that 70,000 mark range. If you get into the 70, there'll be a lot of buyers jumping in, I believe, because on the trading thing, that'll be a big support level for Bitcoin. So maybe one of the bigger opportunities in Bitcoin coming up very, very shortly as this market just goes crazy. Canadian dollar is just, I guess, saying, hey, glad everybody else is getting all this attention in the trade war, because remember when it started, you and I talked about, like, why is Canada getting picked on? All of a sudden, Canada is not the one that's getting picked. The whole world is getting it.
Yeah, I mean, my sort of personal feelings on this in terms of like how worried I've been. I mean, I feel not as worried now. I think there's from a Canadian perspective, but obviously, yeah, we've kind of come out on top. Weirdly, it didn't seem like that was ever going to happen. But overall, I mean, you wouldn't feel that way if you worked in the car making industry, or if you worked in whatever steel production and lumber. Obviously, there's lots of sectors that have been just mauled in Canada. But generally speaking, we kind of got the best deal of anyone, I would say.
So far, so good. So, right? We have to say so far, so good.
I mean, it's like a bit of relief there.
We don't know. But he is starting to get pushback from people like Bill Ackman, who's really big in there, even Elon Musk, and saying we need to kind of get past this tariff war. In this auto market, you mentioned the auto market, and here's the big thing that I think people need to be very, very, very worried about and cognizant of is that if the Liberals win government again and continue with this EV mandate, which I don't hear them talking about removing it, these closures, this auto market that they're trying to protect right now won't exist anyway. Stellantis already temporarily halting production in Canadian and Mexican plants. But I listened to an interview with a Ford executive and saying that they're talking about moving most of their production back to the United States. This EV mandate will kill the auto sector regardless. Like, that question is not being asked. And if we're going to reach out and ask that question, I doubt if we'll get an answer. But that's the question that reporters need to ask. If anybody's listening, that's the question you need to ask the Liberals. Will you end the EV mandate? Because there is no auto sector to protect if you don't end the EV mandate.
Yeah, although they seem to think that it's compatible with having a strong car making industry. But the reality is that, believe it or not, massive companies that can move wherever they want in the world don't tend to like being fined because of what they create per item of what they produce. They don't tend to like that.
There is excess capacity in the plants in the United States for Ford, GM, and Stellantis. There's excess capacity there. and they neither one of them are really making money off of EVs. And if the EV mandate is already dropped in the United States, where do you think common sense tells you, where do you think they're going to go?
Indeed. Yeah, I mean, it's carrot and stick at the same time, isn't it? That's kind of how you destroy an
And if you
industry.
want,
That's how you scare an industry out of your country.
and if you want if you want a electric vehicle, Tesla, which is according to the liberals, the devil, we'll talk about that in a bit, and then they've already have 100% tariffs on Chinese EVs, so where should Canada get its, what as Mark Carney calls, made in Canada automobile industry? The Bricklin? Maybe they're going to revive Bricklin. Maybe that more, I think
Maybe,
that was,
Air Canada, they're going into trains. Maybe they can do cars as well.
I think the Bricklin was on the Rock too, right? The Bricklin was made on the Rock, wasn't it?
Definitely the Maritimes, yeah. It sounds, I think so. Yeah, Newfoundland sounds about right.
But I think it only was in production for a year, the Bricklin SV, which is, stainless steel, almost like the Cybercab, yeah. So, oh no, it was made in New Brunswick between the big years, 1974 and 1975. There you go. And we made a whole 2854 units. There you go. And we used engines. So there's Canada's automaking sector, right there. Right there. There you go. On our AI and tech section, here we go. What differentiates a good pizza from a bad one? There you go. Papa John's to deliver AI-driven pizza experiences. There you go. So they're going to start using AI to kind of like help you with your pizza. They'll suggest orders to you, push notifications, basically just like, hey, it's been like 15 hours since you had a pizza. Now you're ready to order a pizza? You want a pizza? You're going to get bombarded by the Papa John's Pizza Patrol. Who doesn't need that?
I mean, I don't think that's a good idea, really, but I think they'll just annoy people, won't they?
Yeah, time for pizza, time for pizza. And then even better, Amazon tests the new Buy For Me feature. Will actually start buying stuff for you. So get ready. Get that credit card all warmed up because Amazon's going to decide what you need. How does it work? The new feature currently in beta for select U.S. customers integrates agentic AI. You know what I mean? And just customers search for certain products, they'll see listings marked as shop, brand, sites delivered, and it'll actually go out and buy it for you. Look at that, hey?
Weird. I mean, again, I don't know how many people are going to go in for that, but maybe when the technology becomes better and people have total confidence, then
and then this is just a couple other stories that didn't seem to fit in here. But here's your friend from the European Union. We're going to play this clip.
We stand ready to negotiate with the United States. Indeed, we have offered 0 for 0 tariffs for industrial goods, as we have successfully done with many other trading partners, because Europe is always ready for a good deal, so we keep it on the table. But we are also prepared to respond through countermeasures and defend our interests.
There you go.
Bit of a mixed message there from Ursula.
Yeah, I mean, they do have a lot of tariffs that protect their auto industry for sure. So, I mean, I'm sure that's
it was Stephen Miller, one of Trump's inner circle members. He came out and just said the stupidest thing. It's like when they say things like this, it's no wonder the market's gone down because it makes you think that they're just dumb, that they're just stupid. Stephen Miller came out and was talking about how the Europeans don't buy any cars. I think that's a quote. I think that's actually a quote. They don't buy any of our cars. I mean, I can only think that he's just never been to Europe.
Yeah, I've been there.
Just go there. Go to Europe and you will see lots and lots of Fords. Yeah. You will see American cars all over the place. Teslas.
I rented one there. Well, Tesla.
Yeah, it's just why is he saying things like that? That just makes me. I find it so dispiriting. People can be so stupid.
I'll take the good news out of that and said they're ready to sit down and deal. And supposedly 50 other countries have already done a deal. So let's see where this all shakes out. Because Canada so far seems to have a better than expected deal, and not a great deal, but a better than expected deal. Again, our auto industry represents about 1.6% of total world production and under 2% of the purchasing of automobiles. And again, the EV mandate, I think it's a bigger risk to Canada's auto sector than the tariffs.
Yeah, I mean, the situation is still bleak, obviously. It still sucks big time. But I suppose it's kind of like we thought that our house had sort of been burned down, but now it looks like it's just our bedroom has been burned down, whereas the rest of the world now is trying to put out fire in their entire house, so we can look on and sort of feel a bit okay, I guess.
You and I talk about the North a lot, and here's a little geography lesson that we're just going to play this little clip here, a little geography lesson here on the North.
Not all Americans know that the US and Russia are actually much closer to each other, just 2 miles apart. And more than that, they are even connected. Sometimes, and here is why. The countries are separated by the Bering Strait, and if we look closer here, we can see 2 tiny Diomede Islands which are 2.4 miles apart and divide the mainland of the US and the mainland of Russia. Little Diomede belongs to the USA, and it is home to one of the most isolated towns in the USA called Diomede, with a population of 82 people. Big Diomede belongs to Russia and it is uninhabited. Only military personnel are present. Therefore, Diomede is the closest American town to Russia, separated by 2 miles of water. And the point is that in the winter, the water freezes and creates an ice bridge between the 2 countries, and thus making it possible to cross the border by land. Interesting that there is an international date line between these 2 islands. The difference between them is 21 hours, and if you cross the border from the US side, you will be in the future and become a kind of time traveler.
There you go. We're always trying to help you learn too, like hoping you take away something there. Look at that. You can now walk over. You think the comrades are walking over there for a snack? They must have a little cafe there on Little Diomede.
You'd think so. I mean, another thing though to mention, if we're going to teach people things, is that like basically nobody lives in that part of Russia, and I'm talking for like hundreds and hundreds of miles west of that, the furthest eastern point of Russia. And obviously the same is true in Alaska. The population in Alaska is not even very high sort of in general, but the majority of the Alaskan population is quite far away from that. So it is like it's a border, but it's like nobody lives there. And with Russia in particular, the Russian Far East is kind of like notoriously underpopulated. They've never been able to get enough people to live there, to live in the Far East, and that's like a huge chunk of land. So it's a weird situation. It's like they also have a really sort of like quite sort of significant border with China. The Russians do, and yet basically nobody lives there. Again, it's like they have borders with these countries, but then no people there for it to actually mean anything,
There you go, and then on to our EV section. So we'll go through this pretty quickly. Another Holly Jones Blacklock story. It says the government faked that Tesla suspension. That was Chrystia Freeland that said that stuff, and the media outlets ran with it. Tesla vehicles remain eligible for federal rebates despite Transport Minister Chrystia Freeland's claim that she froze payments to punish America. All vehicles that appear on the list have been deemed eligible under the incentives for zero-emission vehicles. Eligibility is restricted to electric vehicles that have 4 functioning wheels, so that disqualifies electric bikes. There you go. Claims that Freeland penalized Tesla. A date from March 26th, Toronto Star Story quoted an email it received from the minister. As soon as I became Transport Minister, I asked the department to stop all payments for Tesla vehicles in order to fully examine each claim individually and determine which ones were eligible. There you go.
That is a very strange thing. I mean, this is why Blacklocks is valuable, really, isn't it? Because they're the only ones that would ever do anything like this, I think. But it's a very weird little story, that.
It did say Minister Freeland has embellished claims in the past. In 2023, Freeland told reporters that she used only climate-friendly transport in Toronto. I walk, I take the subway, she said, and dismissed as blatant misinformation, a Blacklock story, that the minister traveled by car. Records confirm Freeland billed thousands for use of limousines and taxis, while her personal chauffeur claimed 28 days worth of expenses in driving Freeland, mainly in Toronto. There you go. And that's what we talked about. That's when she said she doesn't even own a car and all those things and blah, 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 and told people like she doesn't even understand why people need a car. And while she has a chauffeur driving her around.
That's terrible, isn't it? I mean, again, I have to say, and we can say this because she's our good friend, I just do not believe that Chrystia Freeland is cut out to be a politician of any kind.
And in this last little bit here, another instance, Freeland, as finance minister last April 12th, announced cabinet was unlocking the door to middle class for millions of younger Canadians under its housing program. A secret June 18th federal memo acknowledged Cabinet knew at the time that it was not projected to meet its housing targets.
Mm-hmm. Indeed, yeah.
Say what you will, say what they need to hear. And again, we're gonna work on this story a little bit more. We talked about it earlier. A pregnant woman seriously injured after a large rock smashes through a Tesla windshield. We're gonna follow up on this story, but we're gonna leave that for right now. We're gonna go on to this Sawyer Merritt thing. We're just gonna jump ahead to this next tweet here. The president, not that one. The president, we're gonna find it here. The president of the U.S. Oil and Gas has just ordered a Tesla. We're living in wild times indeed, right? So there you go. There's an oil and gas guy buying a Model 3. There you go. Look at
We
that.
see it all the time, don't we? We're living through an era where people switch sides, or the sides sort of swap places, don't they?
He's saying protesting the protest by protesting my own way with my wallet, he says. And a lot of people that, it was typically the left that was buying, Teslas because of the environment and all that stuff. And then, they're obviously, there's a lot of violence against that. And we're going to work on that story because violence is directed like that young lady that suffered because somebody threw a rock there, the rhetoric in that's being put out there, and then actually being bandied about by even some politicians, and none of them denouncing that yet that I know of. Pretty sad. So there you go. And we got some memes. Again, this is the fun part. This is where we're just having a laugh, just a giggle. And this one, we're going to play this one. This is actually a video meme. And I think a lot of people feel this way. We're going to play this little clip here. I just going to need a second here to play this clip. But this is like where, they're always getting this thing that says that they're there to help. Right? There you go. That's good. Just always out of reach, eh?
Guy on the ladder there is just being lazy. Just needs to speed up a little bit.
Yeah. And then Trump assures pain from tariffs should settle down by his third term. That should drive some people nuts, right? Oh yeah,
that annoys me a little bit because that's people speak about this idea of a president serving 3 terms as extraordinary disgrace that is kind of equivalent to, I don't know, sort of basically makes you Hitler or whatever. But the reality is that it happened very recently, reasonably recently. It happened with FDR, who won 4 times. Yeah. Oh, he died right at the beginning of his 4th term. But I mean, that's the only reason that the amendment was made to the Constitution back in the 1940s. So it's not exactly. It's not banning free speech or something like that. It's not exactly a central sort of foundation stone of the American democracy.
I just don't think we want to give it too much air because other than a joke, because we're already suffering enough anxiety.
No, definitely. I mean, that's a different question about him. Yeah. But I just find it it's people kind of reveal it from time to time how little they know about history, and I think this is one example where they talk about the 3rd term as almost like, all right, he's Hitler now. It's kind of like, well, FDR did it. Does that make him Hitler?
Well, and this
is to me.
There's your stock market portfolio. And now the advisor is telling you now's the time to panic. One man's panic is another man's opportunity. Remember that. Remember that. Fear is, or courage is where something, I can't even remember now. Courage is where, I don't know. I lost that somewhere and all that. But it's definitely, I think it might be at the moment of inflection though. When it gets really chunky and choppy like this is an opportunity. So there you go. It's chunky,
and there will be some people that are going to make absolute ungodly sums of money at this moment.
There's likely going to be some newly minted billionaires because, like I said, a lot of the times the stock market is a transfer of wealth, an absolute transfer of wealth. And if you look at it, If you look at these stocks that are going down, just a piece of advice against this guy here urging you to panic. Piece of advice: has anything changed within the company? Like, you know, if you have this, following this company that you like, and you've invested in it, and you really like it, and ask yourself, this is all being caused by Trump's tariff wars, right? I don't think anybody would argue with that. So if that's the case, and nothing's changed with these companies, and nothing that Trump is doing that can affect really these companies, would this not be the opportunity of a lifetime? Because as much as even Trump won't be there forever. Even if, you know, he continues this tariff thing, which I don't think he will. I think it'll calm down here as he gets deals, as we start to see deals happening all over the place, like even Canada. It'll all calm down, and then those companies that were what they are might be the opportunity of a lifetime. If you think about it. If there's a company directly involved, but I would say, like, you know, look at things, the underlying currents. Like if you look at Canadian auto market, if the Liberals win government and they don't drop that EV mandate, there's likely no auto sector in Canada. Maybe parts. You know, do you know what I mean? Like they will not be manufacturing cars here because there's too much punishment for it. They might manufacture parts, right, that they can ship to the U.S. because there's no EV mandate in the United States. People need to get that through their head. There is no EV mandate. Where do you think Ford's going to manufacture their cars? Do you think they're going to manufacture them here in Canada so they can pay all these different, or buy carbon credits from Brookfield Asset Management? Because that's what they're going to be selling. Guess what, right? Because Mark Carney still loves climate change and the agenda and carbon credits, and that's what he said. People will just have to buy carbon credits. And guess who's set up to sell you a carbon credit?
There's also the energy question as well. In the long run, the Americans have they've lifted restrictions on energy production, which means theoretically cheaper energy. Whereas in Canada, we're hearing Carney wants us to be a green energy superpower. Whenever people actually try and go ahead with that, it means much, much more expensive energy. Just like in the UK now, where their energy, because they're being led by a fanatical sort of green energy enthusiast in the Department of Energy and Climate Change, or whatever they call it, and now their energy is shot up in price. So if that happened in Canada, while it didn't happen in the US, then that would make the car industry even less competitive, because one of the main reasons that Canada is competitive at all in the car industry is because of cheap energy.
There you go. Joe, I don't think they said no new gas cars by 2025. I think that's 2035. But there is, starting next year, I believe 2026, that the penalties, I think 20% of new vehicle sales have to be EVs, I believe, or there'll be punishments, and they have to buy carbon credits to offset that. There you go. That's our show for today. We're back tomorrow. If you like the jacket, the spiff, like we're trying to get more spiffy. We're trying to get Ian on the camera as well. Like that's one of our goals. Get Ian's face. He's kind of like the guy from the, what was that show called? Tim the Tool Man, Handy. What was it called? I can't remember now. Tim the Tool Man.
Oh yeah, Home Improvement.
Home Improvement. There you go. Home Improvement. If
Can't
you like
remember that guy's name, but yeah, the one behind the fence.
Oh yeah, the neighbor, Norb? No, I don't know. I can't remember the neighbor's name. There you go. Mr. Wilson, there you go. One of our viewers got that for us. It was Mr. Wilson. I knew that they used a Mr. in there, so there you go. That was a funny show. Tim the Tool Man. There you go. Follow, like, share. We would appreciate it if you shared. We get no funding from the government. And the only way to get this message out to more people is for you to share it. They took away our Facebook and our Instagram, an audience of over $200,000, or 200,000 people. We would love Bill C-18. We're going to try and get an answer for that too. Nobody talking about Bill C-18. They're just talking about giving CBC more money. Anyway, independent media in Canada being crushed and crippled by Bill C-18. And with that, we do thank you for watching Now Media.